Well, it's January 20th here in the Midwest, and as you can see, we've had some decent snowfall, and heavy snow like this can kill deer. It's actually not the snow, not even the cold temperatures that's killing deer, it's this, people feeding deer. And while they might have good intentions at first just to help deer out in the rough weather, it might spell disaster for the deer. It's called acidosis, and it's actually more common than what you might think. Acidosis occurs in ruminants such as deer when they consume large quantities of readily digestible carbohydrates, and in most instances, the bait used is corn. Now, the big problem with this arises when this new food source is suddenly introduced to them in large quantities, especially in areas where deer aren't normally consuming these carbohydrates in the winter. Deer are again ruminants, so they're relying on microorganisms in their stomach to digest and absorb the food that they eat. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks for them to obtain these microorganisms after slowly introducing a new food source. So when you put out large quantities of carbohydrates like corn in the winter, acute acidosis can happen and death can occur within 72 hours with a full belly of corn. They're not starving to death, they're dying because you fed them. Feeding deer throughout the winter is not necessary. Deer can survive all by themselves. They reduce movement, they reduce food intake, and rely upon their fat reserves. And it's normal for an adult deer to lose 20% of their own body weight over the course of the winter. And the food that they do rely upon is mainly in the form of woody browse. Now, if you do choose to feed deer on your property throughout the winter, you need to know everything that you might cause other than that deer's direct death. What you're doing is concentrating the population of deer on your property to a small area. This increases and heightens the chance of predation. It also increases social stress among individuals, especially mature bucks, especially individuals in large doe families. You're also increasing nose-to-nose contact, which is a great way to spread diseases like CWD, which is of great concern in states like Wisconsin. You're also putting a heavy burden on your local habitat. Woody browse, which is the normal deer diet during this time of year, is subject to overbrowsing. So feeding deer on your property has a lot of bad results. Now, you may be asking, why am I saying all this, but I'm sitting right next to a pile of corn? And yes, this is my property, and yes, I'm putting out corn for deer in the winter. But I'm able to do so successfully. We just recently produced a postseason trail camera survey video, and a lot of deer managers came on there and expressed concern over feeding deer over the winter, which is great because we need education. We need educated people out there spreading awareness. But feeding corn throughout the winter isn't necessarily a bad thing in all areas. This is southern Indiana. We're smack dab in the middle of the Midwest, and we're surrounded by big ag. We have 200 acres of standing corn in the north, 300 acres of cut corn fields in the east, and the same in the west. So we're surrounded by big ag, and that's pretty common everywhere in the Midwest. These deer are accustomed to feeding on corn. They have the required microorganisms in their stomach to digest when you do feed corn. I'm also putting this corn out in small quantities. I'm not coming out here and dumping a large quantity out, introducing to them rapidly. I'm coming out here with very small amounts through the week and a half pre-bait period. And we're only running the survey for 3 weeks. Once the 3 weeks are up, we're gonna wean them off slowly, decreasing the amounts and put them back on their natural diet. This also goes without saying that you should check your state regulations when considering baiting or feeding deer. It's generally a very bad idea to bait or feed deer during the winter, and most state agencies will tell you that. And in some states it's illegal, especially in states with CWD, so make sure you're checking your regulations. Unfortunately, people are feeding deer during the winter in the wrong way and in the wrong areas where deer aren't accustomed to this diet. They're trying to help out, but they're actually doing more harm than good. The best way to fight against this is through education and awareness. So make sure you spread and share this video as much as you can, especially with winter storms coming up and as we head later into winter into February and March.